Well, welcome back to Tools of the Trade here at Baltimore Knife. We have kind of an immense collection of these engraving vices. Usually only find one or two of these in any given shop, but I don't know, somehow I've collected quite a few. They're one of those things that you get your first one and you just kind of keep looking around for things that are interesting. Kind of the history of these, they go back to what we would call an engraving block, which essentially is a ball like we see over here. It's just an cast iron ball that's got a slot in the top that we can mount pretty much anything for tool holding into, but it still allows us to rotate around. Now, the blocks are more useful if you're doing engraving work where you're hammering, because you've got a chisel and you're hammering and the piece is barely moving because it's really just in like a cannonball almost. When we get into either engraving where you're holding the graver fairly still and turning the work as you go, or if you've got a powered handpiece like we see today from companies like GRS and Lindsay, those type of things, these balls that move very nicely and very smoothly, they have big bearings, they work pretty fantastic. Now, one thing that's the same in pretty much all of the more modern engraving vices, unlike the blocks, which are typically screws from one side, is that these are center closing vices. So as we open and close, they go directly back to the middle. And the reason for that and what makes that so useful is that it always puts your work in the center as you make a pivot. So you're pretty much always located in the center. Now there is a change where GRS and a couple of other companies are now making a block like this block where the top of this and the ball actually can be moved separately. So you've got a pivot here, you can turn this pivot, and then this piece will go eccentric anywhere you want. So that's mostly for working under a microscope. So if you're working under a microscope, you need the work to always be centered under the scope, more than to be centered under the ball. That would allow you to then slide this over and create an eccentric where the center of wherever you're working, not necessarily the center of the vise, the center of wherever you're working would be directly under your scope. So it's fairly important. This is the thing that you see in most of the modern engraving shops, where guys are repeatedly working very small under microscopes or setting very small gemstones. That's definitely a use that you see these engraving balls used for, is to hold a piece of jewelry to set a gemstone, either just simply to get it in place in a way to be able to turn it and go around the stone and push the prongs over. But if you're setting in such a way, pave setting or any of the different other styles where you're using a chisel or something to actually hammer the metal over the edge of the stone, really super nice to be able to work all the way around your work as you go with that. You tend to not see people polishing in these. They'll have a separate thing that they use to hold that, but not always. You could certainly polish in one of these as well. To give you a little idea of the breadth of what we have here, we have two engraving blocks, which are, like I said, they look basically like little cannonballs. And so these are, it's very difficult to date these because they certainly go back into the mid to early 1800s, but that style of block can go back considerably farther than that. A little bit later, this is a Victor ball, which you see has very nice, what some people call engine turning, but it's actually called jeweling that you see around the base here. Same thing, center closing, these blocks on top mount the piece in. One thing you will see that with the majority of these top blocks is that one is usually in a fixed position and one will pivot and allow you to move left and right. And as we put different work holding in there to hold different things, it'll allow your piece to be slightly irregular. If we get more irregular, there's a completely different way to hold it, and I'll show you that as well. This is actually one made by Stedman and Stedman in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. This style was patented in 1888. I don't know the actual date of manufacturer, but these styles tend to be before the turn of the century, so in that, you know, that mid to late 1800s. We call these mushrooms. They're obviously, they look like an upside down mushroom. We have a couple. This is another one that is from 1892, so this is a pretty early one. This is a particularly interesting one. This was made at Stephen Company, which was a Baltimore silversmithing company, very large silversmithing company, and I'm told that there were only 4 of these made, and that you know, I know where there's a second one. I have this one. This came from the collection of Rose Duke, who was an engraver at Steve for many years. And these were, I'm told, made during World War II. Same kind of thing where you've got the, you know, the small pivots at the top to hold different objects. This unit is from GRS. This is a GRS Magna Block. This is a currently available item. You can go on the GRS website and buy. They have very large bearings. They will be very good for engraving and for chasing work. And one of the things that we find about these earlier vices is that they are set in with a bronze bushing. There can be a little bit of wear in that bushing, and they're excellent if you're turning and cutting. But if you're chasing, where you're taking a punch, essentially a chasing tool, and you're hammering into the work, they can rock ever so slightly and make your work just a little more difficult and not allow you to put quite as much pressure on as you're chasing. These more modern blocks have big bearings in them, so they have big ball bearings in them, and they'll take that side loading from the hammering a lot better. So this is the block that I work with the most. I have two of these identical GRS Magna blocks, and it's definitely kind of the workhorse in the shop. This is another unit, probably, I'm going to guess this is probably 1960s. This is more like the Victor that's over there. They're roughly the same size. It does have a location where you can put a pin in to lock it, to stop it from spinning. Not all of these do. Some of them have like a screw bolt in the side that allow you to tighten it and lock it that way, and a couple will drop pins in to lock them. It just kind of depends on the pieces. This is also from GRS. This is the one I was talking about that gives you the ability to go eccentric. It is slightly smaller than the Magna block, but essentially I think the tops are pretty, yeah, the tops look pretty much the same, if not identical, and in the same kind of weight range. Then we have what is kind of the absolute Cadillac of these vices from Steve Lindsay. Steve Lindsay makes some of the most fantastic engraving equipment and tools that you've ever seen. He's actually in process of making a fractal vise, which I would love to be the recipient of one as well. So this is the largest vise in the range, and to the best of my knowledge, this is the largest vise you can buy in the world. This is a Steve Lindsay Titan. I also had a Goliath, which is about the same as the GRS Magna block, although I can say that as good as these are, and these are excellent vices, the Steve Lindsay vices are just absolute works of art. I've been told that he only ever made 24 of these Titans. I don't actually know that for sure. I've only had this for about 2 weeks, and I traded my Goliath for it to get it. Because I'm thinking about swords, obviously. You know, we're thinking about being able to hold a fully mounted sword that might weigh 3 to 6 pounds, depending on what we're doing, to be able to work on a sword that was already fully assembled. So as we're, say, laying in some artwork, the sword can be assembled. We kind of look at exactly what we're getting for the finished piece rather than working individual pieces. It would also support, obviously, a big sword blade. You could put a really big sword blade sticking out. It weighs 90 pounds, so it's kind of no joke. These vices tend to be sitting on some form of base. The earliest vices we tend to see, this is a leather, either shot bag or sandbag. I think this one has lead shot in it, but a lot of times these just have sand in them. And they just offer a little bit of resistance to what you're doing. I recently got a block in that somebody just rolled a leather belt up in. And that leather belt gives exactly the same kind of resistance, simpler, but essentially the same thing. What we see with a lot of modern machines, and I have quite a few of these actually, is I believe this is just a tire from like a hand truck, but they have inserted pieces of Teflon. So if we need to be able to move the piece, if we're engraving with a, with a fixed tool and rotating the work, a lot of times I'll use this side. If I need the block to stay in place, I'll flip it over where there's no Teflon, and the rubber tire will hold it pretty firmly. You can get these in different sizes. They cost almost nothing. As we go to another episode where we talk about pitch bowls and things where we're chasing and raising and doing forms in big metal bowls, we still use these, but typically rather than worrying about the Teflon, you'll see people working with the pitch bowl directly on the rubber so that it doesn't move, or we'll put a towel, like a big dish towel, over top of that and then sit the bowl in there. So it just kind of depends on the type of work that you're doing. One of the things that you're doing pretty much on all of these, if you see these vices, they don't really have a way to hold things. This has got a couple little pins. If you had a flat plate sitting on it, you would be able to use those pins for that. But we have various tool holding fixtures, and these are kits available from GRS. So these are your standard things. There are rubber covered pins and steel pins that have small grooves in them to hold all kinds of different shapes. Things for holding flat stuff. Now this would go into the vise and give you a leather face. So say if you were holding a ring or something like that where you're only working on the surface of the ring, that would be very useful. This is a rubber faced chain that will conform to the shape of the edge of something. So you could have, you'd have to figure out what made sense, but maybe 2 rubber pins here and then your irregular shape from maybe a pendant or something that you were trying to hold would be done with that. Once again, this is all stuff that's available still from GRS. You can buy it directly from GRS, and we have a couple of different sets like that. This is actually their knife holding tool. So if you were engraving on a knife blade, we would take this and the knife blade would go in there, or a very irregular shape could go in there, like a pocket knife or a folding knife, and you'd be able to run these screws down and tighten this rubber faced chain and be able to hold any number of very irregular objects with that. So that's something that's a little bit different. GRS product that is currently also available. For holding things that are round, like a round pendant, or more importantly for us, things that are already on the rose engine that we might want to engrave some lettering or set some gemstones on, like the faces on the rose engines, this actually is a chuck, 6 jaws, that open and close and hold like a round disc. Same kind of things that you see as engine turn. But rather than necessarily being on the lathe like that, we've got a brass hex nut here that we can grab, and that allows us to set it directly into one of these vices and hold it and repeatedly hold something exactly in the center that's just simply a round object. When you're buying and selling a lot of this stuff, well, I don't sell very much, but I tend to buy. But we're always looking for things that are special. And one of the things that I encountered while buying one of these early vices was this great little box. So this is a lathe turn piece. It looks like it's in mahogany. And I don't know at what point this was made, but here are all the little holding pins that you see for this vise, although they'll fit all the other vices. But somebody took the time to make something really nice on their lathe, so that if it was going to sit on their bench, it would just be a little prettier thing. You tend to see tools like this in watchmaking, where watchmakers tend to keep all of their things absolutely clean on the surface, and they keep a tidy bench. So they would put all their tools away, they would be set into this unit, and it's pretty nice. It's a pretty nice thing to have just sit on your bench. Well, thank you all for staying with us and kind of looking at this kind of crazy collection. It's not something that honestly I've ever stacked on a table together before, and I love these things, and I hope you love them too. We'd love to hear from you if there's something rare that you'd love to see. Tool wise, there's a good chance that we have it. We'd love to share it with you, so definitely like and comment and let us know, and don't forget to subscribe to both All Me and here at the Baltimore Knife and Sword channel, and we will look forward to showing you more things in the coming future. Click the logo to subscribe, or click one of the videos to see more here on the Baltimore Knife and Sword channel, or go to All Me and watch Man at Arms.